So I just saw Birds of Prey, which was a Harley Quinn spin-off movie, and it was decent.
Can I help you?
Why, yes, you can. I'm here to report a terrible crime.
And what terrible crime is that?
This one.
Here's Curry off the steal. And oh, look out, Curry slipped. And now shoots for three.
So this is a movie starring Margot Robbie, who is the Harley Quinn from Suicide Squad, which was cause for alarm for me. This was a movie that I wasn't particularly interested in. Cathy Yan isn't a director that I have heard of, and the writer is someone that made Shut In. So this was looking like a movie that was going to be just terrible. I went in expecting it to be one of two things. Either A, Suicide Squad, which was a borderline incoherent nightmare of a film, or B, a long and boring movie like Wonder Woman was. Unfortunately, it's neither one. This is actually a pretty entertaining, just simplistic movie starring Harley Quinn. And that's something I didn't expect to be saying at all. The trailers for this looked terrible, just terrible. And I didn't particularly like Margot Robbie in Suicide Squad either. I found her incredibly obnoxious.
Something tells me a whole lot of people are about to die.
Fortunately for this movie, while she is the main character, there are a lot of other characters that are actually likable in this movie that make her character a lot less insufferable. And that is the biggest praise I can say for this movie, is that it isn't insufferable as I expected it to be. But hugely to the credit of Cathy Yan, it actually works. It's actually a movie with a structure that you can follow, it makes sense, and it has some style to it, which is one of the first things in DC that can say that. So, hugely to Cathy Yan's credit, this movie actually works. But even though it does work, I can't say that it's a movie I particularly loved or that I was particularly impressed by. There are more things here, I think, that I absolutely disliked than I absolutely loved, but it's still a pretty entertaining, pretty well-made movie. So just on the bounds of that, I would say go see it. However, the things that bothered me did bother me. The structure is one thing that I thought was particularly messy. The first act of the movie is very garbled and kind of jumbled up and kind of hard to follow because it's told in this non-linear way where Harley Quinn is sort of narrating the whole movie, and because of that, she's sort of the unreliable narrator, like the Joker. And a lot of the movie is told through flashbacks or jump backs or jump forwards, and it will show something, and then 10 minutes later it will show how they led up to that. But it's really only in the first act where this happens, this incredibly non-linear style, and it was very difficult to follow at times and very jarring. There was a scene where Harley Quinn goes into the police station to find this girl that swallowed a diamond, but when she's going into the police station to attack the people, at that moment you don't know what she's going in there for. So there's just this action scene that seems to come out of nowhere that you don't know why anything is happening in it. But then 10 minutes later, it's explained. So I don't care for that. I didn't care for that nonlinear presentation, especially in the first act. I feel like it jumbled up the movie to a degree that hurt it. Then, in the second, leading into the third act, there's a third act low point like most movies have. Every character is at their lowest point. And the way that they get to the lowest point was kind of forced, and it didn't really work because the movie is all centered around this character who swallows a diamond that all the characters in the movie want. So they're coming to get her. And Harley Quinn grabs her and takes her to her apartment that nobody knows she lives at. And they're just hanging out. And it's kind of a fun little sequence where they're just hanging out with each other and they're getting to know each other and like each other. And then out of nowhere, a guy throws like a bomb in her house, and the police show up at the same time, and then someone sells her out, and it all happens in like a 5-minute window, and it was so painfully obvious that they were just going for this third act low point, and that didn't really work for me either. So the structure, I think, is a bit of a mess, and I feel like if you cleaned it up a little bit, it'd be a lot more coherent, especially in the first act, and a little less forced. So that stuff didn't particularly work for me. in line with the other DC movies, the music isn't great. The music decides to go for this mix of score and pop music, but there's also this industrial punk kind of rock that it incorporates a lot, especially in the action sequences, and I felt that it was completely overbearing and out of place at every time it popped up, because the movie itself is a very colorful, very light-hearted movie told from the perspective of a crazy person. Now, maybe this crazy person would love industrial rock, I don't know, but I just didn't feel like it fit the tone of what this movie was going for, a tongue-in-cheek, light-hearted romp, and then industrial music comes in. It didn't really work for me. And the action scenes have this Zack Snyder speed ramping, where it's going from normal speed to super slow-mo, then it speeds up and it slows down, and it felt very dated. Every time any movie does it now, this speed ramping thing, it just feels dated. And it only happens in the action scenes, and when it does happen, I didn't feel like it was that necessary either. There's one part where it slows down and she breaks both these guys' legs with her bat, and I was like, you could have just showed that in normal speed and we would have got what had happened. I don't understand why you did that.
The Joker and I broke up. I wanted a fresh start. But it turns out I wasn't the only Damon Gotham looking for emancipation.
Somehow, I didn't expect this, but most of these characters are all very likable. I really, really liked Ewan McGregor's portrayal of the Black Mask. I don't care about comic books. I haven't read the Black Mask comic book, so I don't know how accurate it is. But I really liked what he did. He's like a germophobic, pretty sensitive guy who gets set off by little things, but he has the power to do something about it because he's somebody. And it made for some really entertaining and some tense sequences. There's one sequence where he's having a guy peel people's faces off, and he's like, save that last one. And she's like, oh, thank you. And she has like snot coming out of her nose, and he's like, oh, gross, peel her face off just because of that. And so I liked him. I liked his character. I liked what they did with him. And the way he dies, even though I would have liked to see him more going forward, is pretty satisfying too. The whole last act is actually pretty satisfying after the forced, try-hard, third act low point moment. It is a pretty satisfying little action scene in this funhouse that's pretty creative and interesting. There's a tongue-in-cheek, self-referential moment where Harley Quinn suddenly has roller skates on, and the movie's like, when did she have time to change her shoes? And they're like, eh. And I went, that's great. It's great that they're acknowledging how silly they are. Even though there's moments where they directly look at the camera, they never talk to the audience like Deadpool would, and I find that stuff much more forgivable than when a character bursts out of the screen and says, oh, I'm in Netflix. That's obnoxious. Don't do that.
Please tell me they put a Walgreens in this Netflix.
But aside from the likable characters and the sort of mixed story for me, the thing I think surprised me most about this that I enjoyed was the overall style of it. There's a lot of Suicide Squad-esque things where it shows a character and then it shows kind of like their grievance with Harley Quinn and their name. It's like a title card for the character, and even though that is horrible and it doesn't work at all in Suicide Squad, I actually thought it worked here. There's a lot of things like that, and the unreliable narrator thing that I think works way better in this movie than something like a Suicide Squad, because our main character, Harley Quinn, is an insane, flamboyant person who has a crazy huge personality. So a lot of this movie that I feel like may have not worked in other movies works here because of that character, because she is directly narrating this story, and it seems like a lot of it is structured off how she would structure it and what she would do. So I like that her character is informing the movie overall. I think that actually really works, despite some jarring, non-linear things. Her personality is all over the movie, and it makes it so much more likable and so much more fun. So that's kind of the best things I could say about the movie, is just that it's really enjoyable. It's super R-rated, so don't take your kids to this, because there's F-bombs every couple minutes and people's face literally get peeled off in front of your eyes. So don't take kids to this. It's pretty R, but for me that made it even more fun, and I really liked Ewan McGregor, and I actually liked Harley Quinn in this, despite me just finding her insufferable in Suicide Squad. I'd probably give it a 6? A 6 out of 10? Solid 6? It's a decent movie. It's pretty good. I'm surprised that it was likable at all. So, that's that.